Hello. In the Crown of Aragon 639 years ago, it was April 11th, 1387. My name is Jonathan Seyfried. I'm a PhD candidate in history at the University of New Mexico. And this is the Historian's Notebook, a podcast about how history gets made. Season 1 is titled Molt Cara Companiona. We're looking at a document from each day of the first year of the reign of King John I of Aragon and Queen Violant de Bar. Let's begin today's document. Today's document is one from Violant, from her Curie Sigilli Secrete register, so the court documents under her secret seal, sent privately. And if you are interested in the history of the 100 Years' War, then this document you're gonna love. And if you're not quite as interested in political and military history, well, then just bear with me, I guess. So, this is like high politics and diplomacy happening for today's document. Violant is writing directly to the captains. There's two captains of this group of mercenaries that has been sent from the King of France, ostensibly, because Charles VI still hasn't gotten power over the government from his uncles, even though he's technically old enough, but the uncles, the Duc de Berry and the Duke of Burgundy, they're still holding on to the reins of power over there in France. And so it really is like the Duc de Berry, one of those dukes, or the Duc de Burgundy. There's a couple other dukes who are running France, and they're the ones that have dispatched this group of mercenaries from France to go to Castile. Okay, so the first line of the letter: Nouvellement haven antes que vos altres ab les compagnies de que sots capitans. Newly I have come to understand that you of your companies that you are captains of, right? All right. So then in the fourth line, Violant says, Així es som merveillada et no sens desplaire. So we are amazed, we are astonished, and not a little displeased, not without displeasure, that we hear, along with the king, we have heard that you are planning to pass through the Crown of Aragon. All right, so this is interesting because Violant had previously, and we talked about this in one of the previous episodes. I can't quite remember which one. Hold on just a sec. Yes, the episode on March 14th, that Violant had declined the request of the King of Castile, who was Juan I, to allow the mercenaries to pass through the Crown of Aragon. So she told the King of Castile a couple weeks, almost a month ago, no, you're not going to be able to send these mercenaries through the Crown of Aragon. And now we see that the message did not get through to the mercenary companies themselves, and so now Violant is writing to them directly. And the person that she mentions, who she has heard this information from, that they're still planning to go through the Crown of Aragon on their way to Castile, the person that she's gotten that information from is the Viscount of Rhoda. That is Ramon Perelos. So, way back in early March 4th, Violant recalled Ramon de Pereles, the Viscount of Rhoda, Viscount, recalled him from Avignon to Barcelona. And I think it was for this mission, to have him take charge of intervening in this situation that was going to cause trouble, which is when you've got 2,000 mercenaries, and the number 2,000 I'm getting from secondary sources that I'll put into the works cited for this particular episode, and via ChatGPT, let's be honest. Okay, so 2,000 mercenaries coming through your country is a real depletion. It's going to cause a depletion of your resources, so they don't want it. Joanne and Violant do not want that. So she sent, and this is just finding this out now from looking at this document, apparently she sent Ramon de Perelos, this elderly statesman who's got a lot of clout with France and people in France because he was there as the ambassador from the Crown of Aragon for many years. She sent him to go intervene. And so she's hearing from him, apparently, because she says, Havem sabut per relatio del Viscomte de Rhoda. So that's the fifth line from the bottom on folio 4R. We've gotten the information from the Viscount of Rhoda. All right. So it's kind of coming together now. You can kind of piece it together, the stuff that we didn't really know about before, like why was Ramon de Perelos being summoned back from Avignon? I think that the answer is that they knew, Joanne and Violant knew, that those mercenaries, they weren't going to be easily stopped from trampling through the Crown of Aragon. And as it actually played out, the mercenaries, they didn't go through the Crown of Aragon. They went around to the north. They went through Navarre. So I guess Violant is like, I don't care how you get to Castile if you're going to Castile, but it's not going to be through the Crown of Aragon. But what that means is that almost assuredly they're going to go through the land and the territory of her buddy, Charles III of Navarre, also a new king who might not have enough clout to put a stop to this kind of thing. So the question is now, why were these mercenaries heading over to Castile? That's where we get connected in to the history of the 100 Years' War. And a figure that, if you know your Shakespeare, will be immediately recognizable to you. John of Gaunt. John of Gaunt. Yeah. So if you know the Shakespeare plays, Henry IV and some others, well, John of Gaunt, he's the old John of Gaunt, is a name that's very recognizable. And yeah, John of Gaunt is very much involved in the English Civil War that ousts Richard II and brings Henry of Bolingbroke into power. But before that happened, when Richard II was still on the throne, John of Gaunt had a very different project. It was a real kind of pursuit of glory in Castile. Well, even before that, he had been, when that sort of England versus France part of the 100 Years' War in the 14th century, when that was running hot, he was fighting in France. But now the actual England versus France fighting is actually simmered down in this decade, the 1380s. And so they're in kind of Cold War status. And so John of Gaunt has time to go over to Iberia. And England and Portugal had long had an alliance, and Castile had been eyeing the acquisition of Portugal, trying to conquer Portugal. Really, I'm summarizing a lot of complicated stuff here. The current king of Castile has taken power after kind of like a real civil war of a messy kind of challenge to the power of the throne of Castile. Has to do with the demise of Pedro the Cruel, who fought against Joan's father, Per the Ceremonious, in what has gone down in history as the War of the Two Pedros. So anyway, it's all super complicated, but basically John of Gaunt married the daughter of Pedro the Cruel, and now says that because he has married the daughter of the last king, he, John of Gaunt, who is a younger son of an English king, he, John of Gaunt, should rule Castile, should basically use the authority of Constance of Castile to basically say, hey, I should be on the throne of Castile. You know, my wife should be Queen of Castile. I should be then King of Castile. And this is like not a very easy argument to win. Like to have some son of a King of England come over and take over Castile. He didn't really seem to have a lot of support within Castile itself. Maybe a couple renegade nobles or something. So Juan I of Castile doesn't really have to worry too much about people really believing this claim. But what he does have to worry about is if John of Gaunt pairs up with the King of Portugal and comes in, and the Portuguese are able to muster enough troops to install John of Gaunt to the throne of Castile. That's what the current King of Castile is worried about. So what does he do? He appeals to the enemy of the English, the enemy of John of Gaunt. That would be France. And so France is like, we will totally help you out. This is such like proxy war, kind of like Cold War mentality kind of stuff. So the leadership in France, which is, you know, Duke de Berry, Duke of Burgundy, they're like, yeah, we'll totally like try to, you know, help the King of Castile because it's going to hurt England, because it's John of Gaunt that's over there trying to get into power in Castile. So what do? They say, we know how to help. We've got mercenaries. We've got these big mercenary companies. And those mercenary companies, even if they're homegrown, they are a pain because they're very much like bandits. They'll show up in these large groups and demand all kinds of sustenance, hand over all of your food stores to feed our mercenary troops as we're hanging out here waiting to get called up for the next fight. They have dubious loyalty. They don't have a lot of honor a lot of the times. I mean, some mercenaries are okay, I guess, but you know, you can kind of imagine all the problems of soldiers for hire and how, yeah, you're going to have some ethical shortcomings a lot of the time with those folks. So you don't want a couple thousand mercenaries just hanging out in your land with nothing to do. So the leadership of France is like, oh, this is great. We can get rid of those bands of mercenaries because it doesn't look like England is going to be attacking us anytime soon. We don't need them. They're a drain. And so then they're like shifting off the problem to other people, right? Like Joanne and Violant are well aware that it sucks to have a bunch of like a couple thousand mercenaries showing up. And they're saying it, right? Violant is saying it if you come, she's writing it directly to these captains. I love it. It's kind of like she's not going to just dance around this in terms of, we would really prefer not, like she did to the King of Castile. The King of Castile letter was like, oh, muito caro hermano, like, most dear brother, we're just so bummed out that we can't help you with this, but if there's anything else, just ask. But in this letter, where she's writing directly to mercenary captains, she's like, don't do it. And I'm going to tell you why. It's because you cause damage to our people. She's like really direct. She's like, when you come through the land, you damage it and you hurt us. So we don't want that. It's all very sensible, but it's very direct. It's like she's not making any effort whatsoever to have like a facade of like, some kind of polite reason, face saving in any way. She's like, no, you mercenaries, you suck. You're not coming in here. And Ramon de Perelos, he pulls it off. So he's able, along with, of course, Violant's directness, to say, it's not happening. Look at how direct the queen has been in this letter to you. Don't even let it get to the level of the king, is maybe the subtext there. And if you try to come in, you're going to get into trouble. And eventually, the captains of the mercenary companies, whose names are Gautier de Passac and Guillermo de Naillac, and those names that are in the address line on folio 4V, they are the same names that are in the historical record as the captains of these mercenary troops that eventually do get to Castile. And so basically Ramon de Perelos is like, you're not gonna do it. You're going to have to, there's gonna be a fight if you come into the Crown of Aragon. And so as it unfolded, they decided to go through Navarre. And I don't know what Charles III of Navarre had to deal with, but it's a really revealing episode where basically Violant is able to put a stop to it. Her authority is respected. So it might be that the governor of Aragon and others are dragging their feet on certain things, but when it comes to the international relations, Violant, through her counselor, Ramon de Perelos, they're able to make these mercenary captains change their plans. So, the mercenary captains eventually did get their 2,000 soldiers into Castile, and that was a significant reason why John of Gaunt really failed to get the throne of Castile. He tried, but his own troops got sick, and then these mercenaries that we're reading about in today's document ended up just pillaging those English troops and the Portuguese, and it all just fizzled. So then John of Gaunt had to go back to England because trouble was brewing with Richard II and what would eventually become the Civil War that brought Henry IV into power. All right. Woo! Look at that. Cool political international document that basically connects Shakespeare stuff to Joan and Violant through John of Gaunt and some French mercenaries. So all very high drama in terms of military stuff and political stuff for today. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Historian's Notebook, Season 1, Molt cara compagnona. If you are leaving with more questions than you arrived with, I've done my job. Although we did answer some questions today from previous episodes, so that's kind of cool. But not all of them. Because remember, the motto of The Historian's Notebook is dissatisfaction guaranteed. Visit the website to see an image of today's document and additional show notes, and listen again tomorrow to hear about the next day in the first year of the reign of King John I of Aragon and Queen Violant de Bar. In the meantime, take care.